Hi everybody, and welcome to Traveling with Russell, and welcome to Moscow, and welcome to a new video. Now today I thought I'd go for a little bit of a walk and show you some of the riverfront here in Moscow, or embankment they like to call it, and just show you the progress and how fast or how quickly the city is becoming bigger. And we're gonna walk in an area where I am right now, and we're gonna go to a second place a little bit closer to where I live to show you a second beautiful spot. Now the weather is actually a little bit overcast, but it's fine. And I want to just show you some of this very nice areas of Moscow that I've discovered, and perhaps even people who live here don't know these spots. Where I'm actually standing right now is the opposite embankment from Moscow City, and you can see off in the distance the skyscrapers. And from this angle it's quite interesting because in a small way it reminds me of the skyline of New York and Manhattan. Now you still get that Russian feeling though, because you can see some of the older apartment buildings right on the riverfront. You can actually see the electric river tram just going by right now. I've done a couple of videos on that as well. I just noticed someone's put a heart right there on the wall, and they've got this very nice embankment on this side of the river, which they'll duplicate on the other side at some point, and this really nice walkway. Now you can see off in the distance some of the apartments. I actually walked from the second bridge way off in the distance, and I went past these apartments that you can see, the white building right there, and then this embankment area as the ferry goes by. This is the world's first year-round electric river tram. It's actually part of the Moscow transport network, and there's actually stations all along the river. And just have a look at this view here. Now there is apartments here on the left hand side. These are all brand new, and I would say there isn't that many people living in them. You can see through a lot of the windows there's a lot of work going on. And then just have a look off in the distance, the amount of apartments that they're building and just how modern it is. And then of course there's snow on the ground. It's actually lightly snowing today. The best time to come walking is right about now because it's not windy, it's not cold. Of course we're wearing jackets and hats and gloves, but the weather is almost perfect because there's not a breath of wind, and there's just snowflakes falling. They've got this really nice setup here. So they've got the bike path in the middle. Of course there's lots of chairs to sit down on. And then they've got this blue path here, which you can see where everybody's been walking, and this is actually recycled car tires, and it's set up as a walking track or a running track. And you'll see the markings here where they encourage people to walk. On this side, this has also got the rubber tiles as well, and these are the similar tiles that they put in a lot of playgrounds. And just what a spot to come to. There has been a huge investment made in the banks of the river here in Moscow, and the revitalization of some districts. Where I'm actually standing now is called Phili, or Filyovskiy Park, depending on how you read the map. And then on the opposite side there would be where Moscow City is. And it really is such a contrast when you see the 5-level older buildings and then the 9-level buildings. And then behind it, all of the very large apartment buildings and office buildings that are slowly creeping across to the left. But what a view they would have from these older apartment buildings. Some of these would have been here probably 30 to 50 years. And then all these brand new places that are popping up. And then people out and about walking, just like I am. Cold weather doesn't keep people in the house, and it's just such a nice time to come for a walk when it's like this. living here, you know it's cold, and you just get on with it. I've actually been wanting to come to this part of Moscow for quite a while. I've been on the river tram a couple of times, and we go right past where we're standing now, and I thought I just had to make it here. I was having breakfast at a cafe just up the road from where I'm standing. I thought it was a good excuse after breakfast to come for a walk along the embankment. If you don't know me, I'm actually an Australian living here in Moscow, and I create videos here on YouTube about my life here in Russia, and the videos are all created in English, and I make different videos about Russian typical living. And for people who live in this area, what a view. Now, of course, it's not all beautiful, I know that, and in summer and winter it is a very different place, but just to come for a walk today like this and enjoy a Moscow winter's day, I think there's nothing better. Perhaps from here you can get a good idea of where they've reclaimed the edge of the river, and they built this gantry or walkway right over the edge of the river line or river wall. What's the correct name for it? So you can actually walk right over the side of the river, and it's actually just so beautiful. Now, I know I keep saying it, you know, the greater area of Moscow seems to never sleep, and the construction never stops, and the amount of new build apartments and office towers that are getting built is just incredible to see. And to come for a walk in this part of Moscow, it really just proves that, really and truly, just by spinning your head around and having a look at these towers. Wow. I don't quite have the crunchy sound of the snow as we're walking along this path. I know a lot of people like this type of content and cinematic walks through the city. The skyline just looks as good as ever. This big bridge in front of us here is actually new construction, and they've not quite linked it up yet with each side of the river, which would make it very convenient for me to get back over to Moscow City to head on home. You can actually see the pontoon where the river trams dock. They actually sit out on the water's edge. These are really nice. They're actually heated inside. There's bathrooms. The trip on the electric river tram is 150 rubles, or $1.50. And I've told this many times that it's probably the best 150 rubles you can spend in Moscow. You can ride the tram for about an hour and a half, depending on which route you take, and it's more than worth it for the ride up and down the river. You can see more apartments. There's a more glass designed one off in the distance as well. I don't love this darker color on these buildings, but I guess they contrast with each other as you walk along the riverfront. This is the viewpoint that I'd seen previously, and this viewpoint looking back towards Moscow City, and you can see the raised walkway a little bit better from here. You could get right down to the river's edge if you want to. I think it's not really necessary. That's such a great view. And then it's so contrasting when you look back and see some of the older apartment buildings, which are very typical in all of Russia. They still exist in the very center of Moscow. People still live in them to this day. However, slowly, you can see how these bigger buildings take over. And then, of course, it puts the price of real estate up just that little bit. But even these older buildings, they wouldn't be cheap to purchase or rent And more than likely, all of these buildings that you see here would have been given to people that live in them as part of the social housing program going back quite a lot of years. And people still live in them to this day, and it's their own private property now. It's really just such an interesting viewpoint, even walking by the cars and the other buildings here, and then staring back at Moscow, or Moscow City, as it's called. That really is the skyline that you think of when you see New York and Manhattan, and the crowded skyline of the city with all the skyscrapers. It's not what most people think of Moscow when they see this view from here. And I can only imagine living in these apartments right here next to us, and then staring at that view all day long out the window. Some people will often call these concrete jungles, and I agree with them in that sense, but urban living is the same all over the world, and the high-rise buildings can't be avoided in some places. I'm curious who set up the Christmas tree right here. They've even plugged in to the electricity and the light pole. But how nice is this? The tree right here in the center of all these apartments. That's such a nice thing to see. Of course, not everybody is sitting outside on the benches today. However, they built this nice little area here in between all of the apartments. I think most people just walking through here at this time of the afternoon. But in the summertime, a very nice place to sit and relax. One more view looking down one of the streets. They've actually put the trees in a nice row there, looking across to the opposite side of the river, and that one very large single apartment building and all of the glass. As I head off to my next destination, and hopefully it's just as beautiful, we'll have to see. We'll get one last look of the skyscrapers that make up Moscow City. And the more angled you get, the more buildings that you see. You can also see them doing some construction right in front of us as well. And then eventually they'll recover all the park area here. You can see those older buildings off in the distance. And there is actually a primary school here as well. They generally build schools immediately by the apartment buildings at the same time. It's generally part of the plan for the construction. This very narrow building right here. You can see them doing the windows, and then the playground isn't so beautiful today. I'd imagine the kids don't come outside when it's cold like this. However, if you're wondering how close the kids have to walk home from school, not more than a couple of minutes. I think I have to show some of the not so beautiful parts of this district. One thing I will say, the apartment building and how slim it is, and those windows right on the corner there. However, if you're wondering how all these apartments get heating, they have heat exchangers, and generally they're the existing ones, or they might build new ones depending on the territory. And you can see the steam coming out of the top of them because of the cold weather. However, this will provide heating to all of the apartment buildings in this immediate area right here, and all the apartments will be nice and warm and cozy inside. From here, I'm actually going to head on to the metro to Phili metro station, which is about 5 minutes walk, I think, straight ahead of me. And then we're going to go to our second destination, and this today is really a nice walk and talk type of video. If you'd like me to go to other districts in Moscow, let me know. And I can certainly show you some of the different areas around Moscow and Moscow region. And these are two that I actually want to see myself. And that's the whole idea behind the video, to show it to you as well. They really do a great job with the lighting on some of these buildings as well. Now it's only early afternoon here in Moscow, but because of winter it gets dark quite early, generally about 4 p.m. It'll be fully dark. And just looking back at the apartment buildings where we walked around, and then just even more of them, these are all finished and people living in them. There's a few more just off in the distance, and you can see an older building there, the white one, tucked in between the new models or new buildings. That's a great view from just here though. And just like that, my teleport device is still working, and we're now here in the very beautiful Sportivnaya region of Moscow. The metro station is just up the road. Probably more known for the Luzhniki Stadium, which is the national stadium of Russia, where they held the Olympics and the World Cup. I want you just to take note of the change in scenery from these very beautiful buildings right here, these brick and cement buildings. And as I just turn the camera around very gently, you can also see the pavement changing as well. And then we go from the older Moscow and back to this new modern Moscow, and these box-like apartment buildings. Some will call them beautiful, some won't. I think some of these do fit a little bit closer into the nearby apartment buildings, but they're not exactly the same. There is still some older multi-level apartment buildings right here. And actually, if you look across the road, you can see where they added the elevator on later on the outside of the building, and even the pavement becomes just that little bit fancier. And where we are here is a place called the Garden Quarter, and I thought this might be an interesting area to take a walk in and have a look at the surrounding buildings. And I think it fits nicely in to what we saw back in Moscow City, and just how the contrasting buildings are between the old and the new, and how they're changing Moscow so quickly. Walking around this part of Moscow, I've never actually been to the Garden Quarter before. I've only seen one photo of it, and it inspired me to come here to check it out. And I'm literally seeing this for the first time as you are on the camera. And I'm even curious how many people in Moscow know about this micro-district and development, because it's squeezed right into a very old part of Moscow, and they've done a lot of redevelopment to get to this stage. So it's just interesting to show this as a contrast between the old Moscow and the new Moscow. There is actually a mixture of commercial offices and mostly residential buildings as we go for a walk around. Now, I really want everybody to let me know in the comments what they think of these modern new build apartments and how they've moved into some of the older areas of Moscow and revitalized some parts. Now, the interesting thing with these buildings, they're connected by these sky bridges. I don't think we can get up to any of them to walk across. But what we really want to go and see is this middle part of this Garden Quarter. Now, depending on what time of year you come here, there's obviously more or less people. Now, being that it's winter, it'll be a little bit quieter. However, it's a very popular place to come for people who want to make photographs and do some advertising and have these buildings in the background. And you can see all these smaller buildings, and then you can see some lights on where the apartments are already occupied. And then there's this really interesting middle area here, and this definitely has that New York feel to it. And there is the area where the NBC studios are and Rockefeller Plaza, and that middle part where they put the ice skating rink in winter. And this is actually a pond which would have water in it, but it's now frozen over. However, how beautiful is this? Even on a overcast, almost gloomy day here in Moscow. But this is just so fascinating to come to. I really wanted to try to come earlier in the season because I was told that hundreds and hundreds of people come here just for the fact it's so photogenic and it's so New York-like, if that's the expression, with the ice rink and then the buildings that wrap around it. These are almost like mini model apartment buildings. They wouldn't have too many tenants in each building, but they're all linked together by a raised sky bridge. And then once we get downstairs, you'll see some of the commercial businesses that are open. There is actually some footsteps across the ice right there, so some people are already daring themselves to walk across it. Perhaps somebody knows a little bit more about this company than I do. There's an international Montessori preschool built into this particular building, and as is very normal in Russia, when they build these micro districts, they always put schools and kindergartens as part of the construction, and then they'll do more or less landscaping. It's really interesting. International Montessori School. Is that a brand that you might have heard of? Let me know as we look back at some of the buildings on the opposite side. It's really quite a mix of private homes and businesses, and they've really tried to mix up the different buildings and the architecture and all this glass on these office buildings right here. Everybody has a very nice view looking over to the pond or ice rink. There's actually some apartments that are for sale. There's actually a real estate agent right here. And of course, depending on how you buy your apartment, they're generally unfinished. These buildings where we're standing, I would be a little bit scared or hesitant to ask the price of some of these apartments. There's one that's completely finished there. I think I might actually try to contact this company to see if there's any possibility of coming to look at some of them. A lot of real estate agents in Russia are not so open to letting people come to make tours of apartments, but I think this area is just so interesting to see the buildings and the different apartment buildings. I definitely think I came at the right time to see this part of Moscow in this early evening time where the lights just make everything look even more beautiful. And it's so interesting that this is only a 5-minute walk from Sportivnaya metro station, and a lot of people perhaps who don't live here come to this area just to enjoy the territory. Of course, to live here would be something on a whole different level. There's definitely people moved into some of the apartments. You can see where the lights are on. I'm sure lots of people are still at work as well. However, this early evening time just makes Moscow just look so much more beautiful, even without trying. I think everybody watching needs to let me know, would you want to live in this part of Moscow? Now from here, the metro will take you to all regions of the city. Do you like this modern architecture and this modern look that they built? Almost every building is slightly different from the next. Would you want to live in this area? You could actually walk to the Moscow River as well from here. Probably would take about 15 or 20 minutes. Now, my perspective may be a little bit skewed of where I live and looking at this place, mostly because of the possible price of apartments here. I don't think they would be quite in the New York price or the price of living in London, but I think it wouldn't be a cheap region to live in terms of buying a new apartment. But that's all relative to what you earn and what you spend. Just like where we started the video and we're walking by the river, they've actually also got this walking track, or perhaps it's a running track, but this is that rubber recycled tire finish that they've put down. So it's nice and easy and comfy to walk on. And you can do laps around the pond. Maybe come here to do some fitness activities. So beautiful in this early evening time. I think you need to come here either in the absolute summertime or like now in this winter time to get that different seasonal feeling living here in Russia. I've made it down to this lower area of the pond, and there's only a few people here. However, what I was told before I came here is there's going to be always lots of people doing videos and reels. There's a couple of girls here working on something, and they're doing take after take to get it right. And there's actually some people out in the middle of the pond. So perhaps they know already that it's frozen over enough that you can walk on it. Not quite skatable yet. Maybe in another couple of weeks. It needs to get a little bit colder so that it's definitely a solid ice rink. There's also some very interesting businesses that they've got set up down here. Looks like this one, it will be a cafe very soon, or a restaurant. There is also a small coffee shop here as well. Just a few people in there. What's really interesting is they've got this Shell oil drum that they've made into a seat, which seems so out of place here. It's so hard as I'm walking around not to just keep staring at the pond and all of the different architecture and buildings and how nice it is. Of course, there is such contrast across Russia that it's impossible to show everything on one video or even on different videos. There's a gym here with boxing literally in the window. I would think that there's probably an instructor and somebody who is getting lessons. And there's this very large fitness center that takes up this whole lower building. Wish we could see this a little bit better, but in the corner of this gym there's actually a 25-meter lap pool that they've got set up. They've of course got some privacy screening on the glass, and you can just see inside. I think there's about 5 lanes in there for swimming training, and then it has a separate cafe. Also, it's actually this whole lower area here, and then there's this very nice reception area. The one thing it does says on the window, no photography. All around the outside of the pond there's these mirrors, and of course they've got the branding of the company that built this whole micro district and a little bit of advertising. But for obvious reasons, so many people come down here to take photos and selfies. It is really a beautiful place to come for a walk like I am doing in the evening. I'm so glad I came. And I'm not really a person that likes doing the selfies in the mirror. However, I've got to do at least one. It looks like perhaps in summertime they have hammocks set up here as well. For winter, they've all been removed. I would say they probably also put some different sunbeds here or beanbags for everybody to relax on. It's very normal in a lot of parks around Russia, they'll do that. Of course, this video is not about advertising or trying to sell apartments. It's just about showing some of the modern Moscow regions, and I'm just showing you two of them. Now, if anybody lives in the Garden Quarter, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like me to come to see your apartment or show me around a little bit more, I'll be more than welcome to come. I don't turn people down when I get offers to go and see apartments and houses here in Russia. If you are interested in apartments in this complex or this micro district, I can certainly put you onto my local real estate agent that I've used. If you are very interested in perhaps buying something here, I certainly have plenty of contacts that can help you. Of course, what price you pay, I'm really not sure, but it's a beautiful place to come and live, I think. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments, or my email is always in the description of the videos. From this upper level, you can actually get a better view of the swimming pool. And of course, it's heated, as it would be when you're swimming indoors in winter. But how is the view from there, looking right over this pond? And no matter what time of year you'd come swimming, you'd have this beautiful view. Perhaps some of the people that train there live in this area as well. Maybe they work in nearby buildings and they come here in the evening. I'm very curious of everybody's opinion of these new modern areas. Now, I think no matter where you live in the world, there is old areas in a town or city and there's new areas, and there's always going to be change eventually. And new areas are going to be literally next to old areas, particularly here in Moscow. So let me know in the comments what you think of these modern apartment buildings and these modern areas that are being built. Should they be more architectural? Should they be more in keeping with the neighboring buildings? Let me know what you think. I only had to walk about 5 minutes and I found the nearest supermarkets. There's Kvartaly, which is one of the more luxurious supermarkets, but this is the smaller coffee shop version where they've just got small amounts of food and cakes and things like that. And then there's actually a Dixie here, which I've been to many times. We've got one around the corner from my house, and this is a very normal, everyday, typical Russian supermarket. And there is also Kuzvil at the end of the building. And where we came from is only a few minutes more that way. So never fear, if you live in these apartments, you've got places to come shopping. I might have to leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of the video. So you can actually see the buildings here that make up the Garden Quarter and this car park right here. And where I'm gonna go and have something to eat. And I'm going to end the video before I have something to eat. So I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger of a future video. This is a very famous food market here in Moscow called Usachevsky Market. And if you want to know where to come for something nice to eat or drink, or just come and do some shopping, this place would be it. It's a mixture of small shops and small kiosks, and there's also lots of different stands that have got fruits and vegetables. And then on the upstairs level, there's actually all sorts of cafes as well. And there is never-ending food choices in this place. And it's an incredibly famous market in Moscow. I think there is not too many people that don't know this place. So I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger, and you'll have to tune in for a future video of Usachevsky Market. As we come to the end of the video, I really hope you've enjoyed this walk around here in Moscow, and to show you some of the contrasting buildings and developments here in the center of Moscow. I'm a little bit away from the center of the city now, here in the market. And you'll have to subscribe and like for a future video of this place. It's really quite unique and there's so many nice places to eat. I'm hoping to find some nice warm soup after walking around for the last few hours. Let me know what you think of the different places that I've shown you, and would you want to live in these micro districts? If you like the video, you can give it a thumbs up. Again, post a comment. And then if you want to follow me on Telegram, there's a link right here. You can click that and follow me on Telegram and my daily travels. And if you want to see an old video on the channel, you can click this link and you can keep traveling with Russell. Okay, everybody, I'm off on another adventure. Bye.